All right, before we get to the episode, I want to let you guys know that we needed a little support, and we have been supported by Manscaped. So Manscaped has gone on and sponsored the Growth Now movement, and Manscaped is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. They offer precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Guys, look, the show needed support, and I needed support. So I went out, I got the Lawnmower 3.0. This third-generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents. And guys, you know, when it's about to be date night with your woman or, hey, a first date, I'm not judging, but you needed to clean it up down there, right? You needed to keep it clean and precise. And all of a sudden you get that accident, right? You nick your balls. It's one of the worst things that you could possibly do. It is painful for days, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, this doesn't happen with the Lawnmower 3.0 from Manscaped. Look, this device is premium. The battery lasts for up to 90 minutes, so you can take a longer shave, guys. It's waterproof technology, allows you to groom in the shower, even has an LED light so you know where you are grooming. I'm telling you right now, it's nick-free. This stuff makes it so easy to trim your balls, saves you a ton of time, so you can focus on the important things like your loved ones and your job. So make sure you guys go ahead and grab it. Let's get that bush to tush clean. You can get 20% off plus free shipping with the code GROWTHNOW at manscaped.com. Make your testes your besties, folks. And ladies, if you're listening, this is a great stocking stuffer for your man. We know that you don't like it when it's a little messy down there, so why don't you just go ahead and do the work for him? Grab it for him, give it as a gift. This is perfect, and he's going to really, really appreciate this gift, whether it be now or at the holidays. Make sure you grab it for them. And look, let's be honest, you're actually grabbing it for yourself. So it's a great gift, win-win. Again, get 20% off and free shipping with the code GROWTHNOW at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Just use the code GROWTHNOW. Trust me, guys, your balls will thank you. What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. This week, I sit down with Craig Fraser. Craig is one of the go-to airbrush artists in the world. You may have seen his artwork for sale in many of the Disney World or Disneyland studios where you can go and buy different arts. He's one of the few commissioned artists through Disney. If you've ever been to one of Guy Fieri's restaurants in the world, you've seen Craig's work as it's been murals on the walls. Some of the top motorcycles and cars that have traveled this great country has been painted by Craig, and he is truly a master of his craft. He teaches many online courses for airbrush artists all over the world, and is truly an amazing human being. I really enjoyed this conversation. I've known Craig for so many years, and we've been able to get along and build a friendship, and I just really love his thought process on life and business and building relationships, and you guys are going to see why I feel he's such an incredible human being during this conversation. We talk about so many great things. We talk about the art of building relationships. We talk about how does somebody go from just some guy who airbrushes to, you know, working with Disney and Guy Fieri. It's not just clean cut. There's no real magic to it. But the reality is when you're as good at your craft as Craig is, magic follows you. So you guys are going to see all of that. And you're going to truly, truly see, and I know I've said this already, but you're going to truly see why I love this guy. Now, before we get there, I want to remind you guys that Growth Now apparel is on sale now. We're actually running a Black Friday sale on all apparel, 20% off across the board. So head over to growthnowapparel.com, get 20% off through Black Friday, and I promise you guys, you're going to love the apparel. You're going to inspire yourself. You're going to inspire others while you're wearing it. growthnowapparel.com. Now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with my good friend, Craig Fraser. Craig, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks. Great to be here, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Dude, it's a long time coming for sure. We met at what was my first thing. I think it was the second thing, or it was called something different. I don't know. The story always gets a little blurry at that point, but we
It was
both
the
spoke
second
at
thing.
it. Okay,
Yeah,
it
it was.
was.
I didn't go to the first one either. I view conventions like new products. I buy the second generation. You know, I come in, just make sure it works, because that way it's like if it doesn't work, there's a waste of time, and also I can't be blamed on it if I wasn't there. So yeah, I was at the second thing.
That's smart. Yeah, and it was funny. You had said something on the stage. I think it was you and Terry having a conversation. We're talking about. I talked about podcasting. I had it, and you talked about your craft that we're going to get into. But you're like, yeah, people are telling me I should start a podcast because I know a lot of interesting people. And Justin back there with his 1.7 GPA, you go. I have a 4.0, or I had a 4.0 GPA. I could kick his ass. And I was like, I need to be friends with that guy. And so
I specifically said I got to go talk to. I actually segued into that by saying the best thing here is networking. I go, just listen to Justin just now on stage talking about the podcast, and anyone can do it. I go, I need to talk to him, and then I mentioned the GPA thing, which is funny. But when you're in college for 10 years in 4 different universities, if you haven't figured out how to get a 4.0, you shouldn't be in college. And why were you in it for 10 years? So.
Yeah, right. It's the game. It's the game of. I only made it through 3 semesters of college, and I was like, this just isn't for me. What am I voluntarily doing this for? But I want to get into what it is you do, because it's super interesting to me, and I've learned so much about the intricacies of your industry from you over the many times we've met at the thing. Just talking about how in depth it can get, because I had no idea, right? So like you're an airbrusher, and that sounds very. Airbrush artist. Sorry, so you're an airbrush artist.
I'm not one of those people that needs the E at the end for artiste. Trust me, I used to like the word technician better than artiste. I would say I'm not an artist. I don't have John Lennon glasses. I don't walk around with Nietzsche, and I don't hang out in coffee bars and quote things. So, but I've been called an artist enough. It's enough. It's a nice enough compliment. But I don't even just really relegate myself just to airbrushing. Most people know me because of the airbrush industry, but I do a lot of different versions of creative expression. So.
Yeah, no, people are listening to this conversation so far, and they're like, this guy's been in 4 colleges for 10 years, and now he does some airbrushing, and he's an airbrush artist and very, very talented at it. Well, talk about that path a little bit. How did you get into the art side of things, even though college was clearly a huge chunk of your life?
Well, my dad was, at the time, my dad was ex-military intelligence. He was in the Army. And he ended up going back into the Army, ended up retiring lieutenant colonel. But he was also an artist. He was a very good oil painter. And my mother was into acrylics and loved acrylic painting and pastels and watercolor. And she was a teacher. And my dad did some teaching too on the side. And later became, within the military, became a chaplain. So he was lieutenant colonel Army, and he was the head of, I think he was second in command of all the chaplains in all the armed forces. None of my parents encouraged me really to go into art. My dad always wanted me to be in the Army. And so my mom always wanted me to be a doctor or something. We used to always make jokes about, she's like all the time. And I said, I don't want to go to be in college that long. By the time I was in college for like 8 years, she's like, you could have been a doctor. And I was like, it's like, really? I would have been a horrible doctor. I would have been like Joseph Mengele. And she was like, what's that mean? I go, well, think about it. I constantly am experimenting and innovating and tearing things apart and doing the wrong thing. If you tell me 3 things not to do with your new product, those are the first 3 things I do. And I'll come up with the 4th you didn't even think about not doing. And so if I was a doctor, I'd be good. And I always make jokes. I go, I'd be like House good. I'd be like, you Lori. I'd have the cane to hit people with. I'd be on Vicodin. And I'd know everything. But the problem is I'd be worse than you, Lori. I'd have a room in the back with like 100 dead bodies. And I'd be like, give me one more and I'll have the cure for cancer. Just one more. Give me a prisoner. Give me somebody. And I would justify it that way. Now, I'm not a horrible person. If I was, I would have gone into that industry. I know what I do. I am the Samsung luggage monkey tester of all products in the airbrush industry and techniques. And so I'm always pushing the envelope of things. And when you use the term end justifies the means, anytime you're dealing with like politics or upper level people, people's lives are at stake at that. In art, it's like, end justifies the means. So I always was encouraged, not encouraged, but just not discouraged to do art. And I always did drawing. I always loved drawing. And my first, interest was music actually. And that was my first major. And I did get an associate arts in that, but then I went right into computer science. And I was fascinated with that and found that all I really liked to do was hack and play games and mess around. And back then it wasn't even computer science. It was like a math major with a strength in computer science. So we're talking in the 80s. Yeah. So people know when I got into computer science, they had just moved the punch card machines out. They were in the hallway still. So we were just one step removed. Yes, this is not blonde. This is gray. So I went into that and I was like, I love it, but not for a living. And then I went into aeronautical engineering because I love planes.
Yeah.
And then 2 years into that, my grandfather, who worked at McDonnell Douglas and used aircraft at one time, he was like, McDonnell Douglas just laid off like 2,000 people back in '86 and said, you're not going to get a job here anytime soon. So I transferred to architecture and went over to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and then finished up my degree over in the University Independenza in Firenze, Italy. So all of this was done just to kind of find something I wanted to do for a living. I loved architecture, but not the reality of it. I didn't like dealing with the political level of what you could call, code violations and things. I was like, I want to build this. You can't build this without, permission. I was building things unsafely, but I was just annoyed by some of the zoning restrictions and things like that, and the politics involved in architecture.
Sure.
In Italy, it made a lot more sense than over here. I love the art and the design aspect of it. Meanwhile, throughout all this time in college and for 10 years, I was paying for everything with airbrushing. I started doing t-shirts, started doing wall murals, body painting in Europe, you name it, any aspect. I used to always make jokes back then. If it has mass and occupies space, I probably have painted on it. And to this day, that pretty much holds true. I still say that. If it has mass and occupies space, I'll either paint it, rebuild it, redesign it, or teach someone how to do that. And that's just what I do.
Yeah. So obviously that's what you fell into, and that's what you found you loved, and that's now what you do full time. And you don't only just do it full time, like you're one of the best in the world. Like you work with celebrities and all these other people, and you work with Disney, which is really amazing. Talk to me a little bit about that path. Like, how does somebody go from, hey, yeah, this is a fun thing that I happen to be good at, and now all of a sudden you're working with some of the biggest names in the world, like Guy Fieri. Did I say his last name right?
No, it's Fieri, but trust me, he's heard it so many different wrong ways. Yeah.
Guy Fieri, Walt Disney, all of these things. Like, how does that happen? Because I think there's so many people who have this dream and this wish, and they don't know how to make it come to fruition, where it's like the big part of their life and it's paying their bills and it's doing all these things for them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. If this is a podcast, you could actually have an E.F. Hutton moment. If you made a comment like, hey, this is how you work for Disney, everyone's all of a sudden quiet and taking notes. Yeah. And I have people constantly hit me up like, hey, can you get me into Disney? Hey, can you get me? And it's like, I'm not being a jerk by saying no. It's like the way I did it doesn't make a lot of sense. And the same thing with Guy Fieri. I've painted the majority, not all. He's got some other restaurants, other artists did work in, but I did a lot of concept art design and interior work, and mostly like all the murals in, I'd say, the majority of the restaurants that have murals. And from not just the United States, also Dubai, South Africa, Mexico. And I got that job because of one of my students. I was teaching a guy this guy called me up and wanted to learn a couple of airbrush techniques. And I knew him as being a badass painter up in Northern California. And he comes down and we're talking, and all of a sudden he had a phone call he had to take. And he's like, yeah, that's my boss, Guy Fieri. I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to go talk to Gordon Ramsay later. And he's like, no, really? He goes, actually, I've known him for years. I do all the paint work on his cars. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Well, Guy hit him up and wanted to know, because Guy needed him to do something. He goes, what are you doing in Bakersfield? He goes, oh, I'm taking a class. He goes, what are you taking a class? You're my top painter. And he's like, well, and he sent Guy a couple of pictures of some of the things that he was working on, stuff he didn't normally do. Yeah. And Guy saw my work and he was like, does he do murals in restaurants? And which is funny is I hadn't done any in a while. But when I was in Italy back in 1990, I did tons of nightclub murals and had done a lot of murals off and on inside buildings. And so that got me that job with Guy. And then overnight, all of a sudden, I'm designing, painting his cars, as well as his sand toys and different things, and designing different logos for his company and doing the art.
That's awesome.
And then because of Gary Magetti was at the time, he still is with Disney, but at the time he was the head in food and beverage and entertainment at Disney parks. And I'm not sure if both parks, but at least Disneyland here in Anaheim. He was at Guy's birthday party. and I was supposed to be there, but I was off on a job, so I couldn't do it. And he was looking for me and ran into, and Guy was like, oh, he's here somewhere. Guy, so many people there. Guy didn't know I wasn't at the party. And so Guy's like, well, Aaron Hagar is a good friend of Craig's, and he's a badass painter too. So go talk to Aaron. Aaron can do the work for you if you need something airbrushing. Craig's not here. And Aaron is Sammy Hagar's son. I've known Aaron off and on because of just, he's a badass painter and he's a killer car builder. And I've known him from going to the different car shows in Vegas I've done.
Right.
He was like, I don't do anything on stage and I don't paint in front of people. You need to talk to Craig. So he had my number and he got me in touch. And so next thing I know, I'm doing live demos on stage with Gary Majetti at the Food and Wine event at California Adventure at Disneyland. Then they turned around and fast tracked me to being a licensed artist because they wanted to start selling my work and doing licensed products for them. And then I became a licensed artist through Disney Parks. My stuff's in both Disneyland and also Disney World and different galleries between the two. So I give that long story because it's like, and I don't mean to be name dropping with these things, but it's like, this is not a path that is sane. Because if I turned around and said, how are you getting into Disney? I'm not going to show up to Guy's party so that he can refer the head guy that I didn't even met ever to Aaron Hagar, who will then call me and get me the job.
Yeah.
No, that's just, I mean, I've got a messed up brain. I wouldn't come up with that. Monty Python would laugh at that. That's just too stupid to be a sketch. It wouldn't even work.
Yeah. And I mean, if you really look at it, and I mean, if you put something to it, it's a craft that you got so good at that people couldn't ignore you. Right. And then that gets you into elite rooms like Disney and Guy and all these other people that you work with as well. I mean, that's really kind of the secret to it. Right. Now, give me a timeline, just so I know. You're talking about the early 90s. You're talking about, obviously now you're still doing it, but like, what's the timeline of this build? Because this is what you do. Like, you also own a business where you're doing people's motorcycles and cars and all that stuff too. So walk me through the timeline of this entrepreneurial journey that you've had. Have you ever worked for anybody else?
I've worked for a lot of people. I haven't punched a time card since 1988, and that was at Mervin's at San Luis Obispo and at Cal Poly, where I was a breakfast chef at 4 a.m. in the morning. That's the only time I haven't punched a time clock since. But I do work for a number of people, and I work for companies. I've worked for Google. I've worked for Facebook. Worked for Amazon. There's a number of companies that I've done consulting with: Trek mountain bikes, Harley Davidson, different paint companies, and also different movie industries and stuff. I've done stuff for them. So the timeline really, when I came back from Italy, was around 91. I was 92 as I moved back from Italy, and I also had just met my to-be wife actually in Italy. She was actually kind of funny. She's my best friend's little sister, but she was on a tour with her orchestra over in Europe while I was getting ready to come back from studying over there for a little over a year. And so we'd started dating, and I moved back here, and I was living on the coast working for an architect and finishing up some last minute crap to get my degree. And then I was going back and forth to Bakersfield, and my sister, her boss at a local clothing store's husband needed an airbrush artist, and just for a rendering, a one-time job. So I showed up, did the job. The guy asked me, could I do a hood mural? And I said, yeah, sure. So he pulled one off the wall. Say, what time? Do you have any time to do it? So I told him to mix me up a couple of colors. I just did a design I'd done over and over again when I ran a shirt shop over in Italy when I was going to school there. So it was just a kind of creepy Gothic design, very, a lot of skulls, which works well on hood murals. And I did it real quick for him and thought nothing of it. Next thing I know, I'm doing more and more work for him. And that was Dion Giuliano, who owns Cal Concepts. Now, at that time, my company was Air Syndicate. That was just my own personal company. I'd had a couple people working for me, but decided that really wasn't for me. I decided to do my own thing. And we worked together and I moved in the shop, moved back to Bakersfield, got married, started working full time at Cal Concepts as the in-house designer, but kept my company separate. So me and Dion, we both are under the same roof, but we have a handshake agreement. I got my company, he has his. And went from there. We both started a company called KGB, which was stands for Customs Gone Bad. It was a clothing line. And we did dabbled in that, and it really wasn't for us. We were more interested in painting cars and bikes. That's mostly what Dion does. Dion has a history going back. Cal Concepts is actually the original Curtis craft, which is one of the top racing companies in the United States when it comes to sprint cars, Indy cars, and boats. And so we have a long history in doing restorations on his grandfather's and stepfather's vehicles. And then we do our own custom work as well. And we still do that. And then that's grown to the point where we do a lot of work for the studios, doing large sculptures for artists across the country, where they'll give us, we can do casting and molding and fiberglass work, Dion's background in boats. So we can make these huge sculptures, and we can also paint them. We can also do all the engineering involved in them. And then we're slowly, with my sons getting involved with 3D printing, we're going to start branching into some 3D printing options through our shop. We've already done it. I've had my son make a couple of parts for Harley Davidsons that we've 3D printed, that we've designed, 3D printed, and I painted. So I've been with Dion since '92, and we're still together doing that stuff. So, and then around '93, '94, I started writing for the magazines. And I had about $50,000 of the student loans to pay off. So I refused to pay off my student loans with something that had nothing to do with what I was studying. So I figured if I'm writing, that's close to the term papers I had to do in college. So I figured I'm going to write until I pay off my student loans. And so I started writing for magazines. Next thing I know, I wrote a book. Next thing I know, I wrote 2 books, and then it was 3 books. And one of them, we sold over 400,000 copies. So that's, I think, bestsellers 100,000. So we did pretty good with that. And then I started doing videos, and had about 15 DVDs out on technical and how-to painting. Started designing stencils for this one company called Art Tool, where I worked as a product developer also for companies like House of Color, and started doing working with paint, tape companies, any company that manufactured a product that was used in the automotive custom industry, or what we call the custom culture. I usually would try and put my 2 bits in, or I either work with them on a design, or I'd be a consultant. And even some of the TV shows that came out. And I worked for Jesse James for a while. I worked for Billy Lane. I've been on TV very, very little. Wasn't really into that. But I love working behind the scenes. I love working on the actual projects. And then
although you should have your own television show.
Yeah, but I don't know if that would end well. I mean, my podcast, This May End Badly, is self-titled in that. I used to make jokes that people would say, you're so good at what you should be a politician, because I go, if I was a politician, I'd be shot by my own people. If I was if I was on a television show, I'd be killed by my own producer, most likely. So, our director, someone would have it in for me. I do very well in small samplings. I think I get along so well with Terry Weaver because he's on the other side of the country from me. And I don't know if that's protecting him from me or me from him, but
Dude,
there's very few people that have put up with me in close proximity.
I love it, man. I want to dive into the creative side of things and what you do, right? So you started really this thing early 90s, and now here we are in 2020, the weirdest year of all time. And you're still going strong. How do you stay creative? How do you stay motivated? How do you come up with the next great idea? Not only do you do things for all these clients, you're doing your own stuff too. If people follow you on Instagram, it's a daily. Are you still doing the daily sketches? Are you still doing all that stuff? How do you stay motivated and driven?
If you follow me on a regular basis, Justin, I listen to your
I just don't see everything. Yep. I do follow you. I just don't see everything.
It takes 1 second to look at my drawing, and I actually listened to you for God knows how long.
I'm sorry.
But your voice is so soothing, Justin. I just say, if I need to get to sleep at night, I have my favorite versions of your podcast. Oh, this one puts me to sleep in 5 minutes. I'm just teasing. But I have to say diversity. I kind of have a borderline Asperger's to my son, though. His is much more social than me. But besides not having a filter, which Terry Weaver loves about me, and many people at work with me, we love when you don't have a filter. I'm like, yeah, until the filter direct, the lack of filter is direct in your direction. And but it's literally is diversity. I don't have a long attention span beyond the development of a product or something. I never like perfecting something. I'm not a perfectionist. And the reason I'm not a perfectionist is because I can feel it in the back of my head that I want to be. And the same reason I don't collect things, because I would become completely OCD on it. I'd be completely obsessed by it. So I know what my downsides are. I know what I'm really good at is developing something and then delegating it to somebody else, or using something to a certain extent and then saying, here, you figure out what you can do with it. I also know that every single thing out there, whether it be a style, a technique, a theme, a medium, it all is time determined. Everything has a lifespan. And when you're coming in at something, you either come in at the beginning, which is subjective. You never know if it's going to make your student a lot of speculation, or you come in at the tail end where you're trying to ride a wave that's already jumped. And I'm just constantly playing with something and then setting it out there. I always make jokes about, you need to have more than one basket for all your eggs. I go, I've got baskets that are turned over with cobwebs on that I don't even remember what eggs were in them, but they're still there. And then every now and then I come across, it's like finding money in a couch. Every then I'll find something like, oh, there's a little project that's starving to death. I forgot about him 3 years ago. Granted, hopefully it's not attached to a client that's also pissed at me. But it's I will try and get so many things going that, and it's not, I'm trying to create a form of clutter, but it's almost like a form of graphic noise that I kind of need in my head. And I realize if I focus on one job at a time, I will get locked up on that project, like staring at that Scantron during an SAT exam. And they always say, go on to the next question. And honestly, that's some of the best advice, not just literally, but figuratively, I've gotten from anyone was go on. And I realized that if I'm working on multiple projects, some of the other projects that I never would have ever thought would help on this other project will answer the question to that project by opening up a door I never thought existed.
Can you give an example of that?
Oh, well, I was actually working on an article. I had to do a step-by-step for this one magazine. And so I was just pissed off. I didn't want to do it. I was behind on a lot of other projects. So I said, okay, so I picked something I did not have to think about. And most of my articles I wrote about in the magazines, the tech articles, were projects I was doing at the time. So I just took pictures as I was working and then would go through and edit them and write the articles. It was super simple. I was just kind of like, man, I'm getting paid twice for this job. It was great. And this situation, I had to actually develop something just for this article. And I was not happy about it. So I remember grabbing something that I had done a million times. This was a project I was I was kind of known for this technique and for this style. And so I'm just going to do that as simple. So I broke it down. And while I was breaking it down, I realized that the normal 6 or 8 steps that I would do that project in, 2 of those steps are kind of stupid. And I went back and found I could do the entire project within 4 steps and realized that I had been doing something over and over again. And I was so good. And I was considered, I had people would say, oh, that Craig's the one that started that. Craig's the one. And I didn't. But I was the most, in the magazines and the videos, I was known for it. And in the industry, it was known. People were crediting me with the technique. And as far as I know, it was the first airbrush artist to do this technique. And so it was something that I was already doing well at. And all of a sudden, I realized a better way of doing it. And at that point, I started recommending people start writing articles, even if you didn't intend to ever publish, because as soon as you break something down and 2 steps to explain it, or teach it, or write about it, or do a video on it, you all of a sudden see it in a new light, and it allows both sides of your brain to attack the subject without, oh yeah, that's just the way it is. It can't be any better. Everything can be improved upon. Matter of fact, if you don't improve on something every day, someone will come along and their first time messing with it, they'll come up with a better version. So you've got to always, nothing is perfect, nothing is done, everything can change. Even if this was a static environment where nothing ever improves in this world, where we don't have new products and everyone likes the same stuff, because the way our brains are wired, you could still come up with new and different and better ways of doing the same stuff. But we don't have that. The only constant in any industry is change, whether people like that or not, which is funny because it's also one of the biggest fears people have. And that's like saying, what's your biggest fear? And someone says existence. And you laugh at them because you're like, yeah, you're not going to get away with that one. Well, you're not going to get away with change either, or failure. And so it's really funny how I look at some of the worst fears out there as being some of the greatest tools. And what's the biggest fear of any artist or any individual? But when it comes to art, it's a little bit more personal. It's being relegated to the ash heap of creativity, to be just not even a footnote in history, to be forgotten. People say, oh, I wish I was Van Gogh. I go, really? You want to only sell one paint in your entire life, cut off your ear and shoot yourself and basically write a bunch of obvious stories to your brother, and then only to be considered famous hundreds of years later? Oh yeah, wherever he is, well, he's looking down, he's very proud. I go, no, he's pissed. He goes, oh, really? Paintings go for that much? I sold painting and just had enough money to buy a bunch of bread and laudanum and whatever. So I always tell people that if you focus on what you're doing, there's a reason behind it. And if you look at the steps, you can always figure out a better way of doing it. Or maybe you'll figure out something that has nothing to do with what you're working on. But if you keep your mind open, you can use that technique for something else. And you've heard the term left field. People get things from left field. I live in freaking left field. I love left field. Actually, I never played left field. I always played right field. But I love the aspect of that analogy of left field. No one expects it. It just comes out left field. And that's the thing, is so many people don't expect it. People always hear that, oh, opportunity only knocks once. I don't know what messed up person told that to some kid. Opportunity doesn't just knock once. It never stops knocking on an infinite number of doors at an infinite number of time for an infinite number of people. And it comes down to what, some of those doors you open, you wish you had. That's still a learning experience. And you'll learn to recognize that door later, or you might learn how to deal with that bad door. And that's better down the road. And so one of the things I teach is a process. I'm not going to, I'll teach techniques. I love techniques, but techniques are nothing but be like, you want to buy a car from someone, they hand you a bunch of parts. There's the car. And you're like, I wanted the car altogether. Oh, you didn't say that. People want to learn how to be a great painter, and then they learn the techniques. Like, you do realize that's like me handing you a bunch of parts. The process of putting it together, the composition process, the design process. I'm fascinated with that because very few people teach it, because the majority of artists out there don't know what the hell they're doing. There's no such thing as someone that's naturally born with technique. What people are naturally born with is an ability of process, of putting things together, seeing them a certain way. And so they can teach every technique they've learned, but they can't teach why they are who they are. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Some of the best artists out there can't teach you why they paint the way they do, because they don't even know. They can just teach you how. They can tell you the paint. They can tell you the canvas. They can tell you the number, size of the pencil, or whatever. They can even walk you through step by step, but you can duplicate it. When I teach people things, I'll show them certain designs, and I said, you can duplicate me exactly. What you can't do, what I'm going to do next. And that's not because I'm so weird and out there in left field. It's because you can't predict what anyone's going to do next. So I'm fascinated by that. And that's, a long answer here. You discovered I'm full of long answers. That's the way I approach things.
I love it.
It can be nightmares sometimes, but hey, what's the number one selling movies out there based on nightmares?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Perfect time coming up on Halloween. But I love so much of what you said there. And it's interesting because, like you said, you can go learn all the things, but you're still yourself. Even if you're learning from a specific teacher, you're still yourself. And then that's really the magic, right? Like, that's what makes your art as good as it is because it's you putting your own personality into it. But you've gotten to a point in your life where it's, like you said, a lot of it's just...
Well, you can't fake not being you. You can pretend to be... You can pretend to be somebody else.
Yeah.
But you can't fake not being you. When I hear, I remember back in the day, do you remember a guy named Rich Little?
I don't.
Rich Little was a famous impersonator. He used to always do Johnny Carson, and he would always be on Johnny Carson. He's actually still alive. He's got to be 105 years old by now, but sorry, Rich. I loved Rich Little, watching on the Johnny Carson show. Whenever he did Johnny Carson, you knew he was doing Johnny Carson, but I knew it was Rich Little's Johnny Carson. When you hear someone do Sean Connery, it's not Sean Connery, it's somebody doing Sean Connery.
Yeah.
When you hear these people do, different impersonations, and it's the same, the same way when you're, to teach somebody how to actually be different from themselves is impossible. What you have to do is let them just accept who they are. It's going to come through no matter what. You almost get to the point where you kind of give up. Every artist is focused on wanting to be somebody else in the beginning. Very, very, very few people, unless they're sociopaths, they always are going to look like, oh, I want to be this artist, or I want to be that artist, I want to be this musician. And later on, when you go beyond that, you still use it. You don't ignore those artists. You say, those are my great influences. But you're not completely obsessed by them. Some artists do get that way. It's almost like, like that movie, Single White Females, like single white artists. There's some artists out there. It's like, no, you're not Patrick Nagel. You're never going to be Patrick Nagel. Stop trying to be Patrick Nagel, because everyone knows that he's dead and you're not him. It's like some people just get locked in. So I get some artists approach me and they're like, I'm so worried about copying another artist. I go, okay, then don't. There you go. So that's done. What else do you need? What other problems? He goes, well, no, but how do you not copy them? I was like, well, stop copying them. I go, here's the thing. People always think, I remember one artist came to me and he was like, well, everything I do is unique. I go, really? Congratulations. He goes, I'm not influenced by any artist. I just do everything off the top of my head. I'm like, okay. I go, fine. And it was in the middle of one of my classes, and this 4-day workshop was like about $595 workshop that he was taking from me. And he's in the classroom. He was very adamant about not stealing from anybody. He doesn't even subscribe to me. He was like, he's taking my class just to learn techniques, not style. And yeah. I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's like going to a buffet because you really want the water and the napkins. It's like, whatever, that's free anyway. And so I was like, so I'll tell you what, I go, you've got this entire week, come up with something that you've never seen of, heard of, or experienced in any of your senses. You've never read about, you never observed, and then you need to put it on paper and show it to me. And if you can do that, I go, I will comp your class. Before the conversation was done, he says, well, I can't do that. I go, because nothing comes out of here. There's not a single thing that came from your head. It goes through your head. I go, we're not idea creation machines. You know, we're not like that little sliding door on the Enterprise where you say, you know, Earl Grey tea, please. And all of a sudden it's Earl Grey tea in a cup, you know. Things don't come from nothing. We're synthesizers. Basically, we're not even really that accurate. We're kind of weird synthesizers, because if I put 20 computers in a row and put the same input in all 20 computers, they're either going to give me back the same answer or they're broken. They're not going to, you know, they're you know, but you put 20 people in a row and you do that little, what's that called, telephone game or something, where you say one thing, the person's here, by the time you get,
lane.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense anymore. And that's because each of our brains are wired so differently. There's so many more options, you know, so many more IOs, so many RNN switches, so many more different connections on there, you know, that you can never predict it. Well, that's the true interesting thing. That's why people, you know, an individual, I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how talented your people say you are. The most untalented, uneducated ignoramus out there is still infinitely has the possibility to be more creative than any Einsteinian, you know, artist or anyone out there, because of the fact that it's just a unique take on things. And art has a lot of different, people like art for different reasons. Sometimes you like art because it reminds them of something and it comforts them. Other times they like things that are shocking, disturbing, are completely diametrically opposed everything they've seen before. Sometimes different is the best. Sometimes different's just different. Sometimes different is bad. These are the crapshoots that you take with art, and that's why you can't just crank out something. You've got to also take into consideration the person cranking it out. You know, me doing a painting is different of the same subject as someone next to me is totally different because of my background, but also my perception of what I'm doing. Maybe what I feel about the client is going to be affected in that painting. And I'm fascinated by that stuff because, and I know I jump around with a lot of analogies, but
I love it.
When I was a kid, when my parents would take me on rides at Disneyland, and I've been going to Disneyland ever since I was really little. Matter of fact, I rode on the Haunted Mansion on my mom's lap. I was about 4 years old, and the ride had only been open for like 3 months. And I rode on that, and I also had been on the Pirates of the Caribbean as well. And as far as I know, I was on there when I was like 2 or 3. So, but when I was younger and I could sit by myself and not be on my parents' lap, and I actually remember when I could not have to sit on my parents' lap. That's a big deal. I had seen the ride already. So when we're going to that one area where the ships are battling, you know, the fort, and everyone's all fascinated by that, I was looking behind me at the cameras and the lights and the projectors and the windows I saw way up there, wondering what that was, only to find out many years later it was actually Walt's apartments above the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's now a gallery up there, the Dream Suites, I think they call it. So I was always more interested in that. I love magicians, but I didn't want to spoil the trick. I didn't want to be that jerk saying, how do you do it? How do you do it? You know, I wanted to figure out how to do it. And sometimes I found an interesting technique. If if you ask somebody how to do something and they tell you, that's nice for them. It's nice for you, but you'll stop looking. If no one will tell you how to do something, a lot of times you'll figure it out on your own and figure it out a better way by yourself because you have a different background, different perspective. So I got to the point where I would not ask for help on things unless I was absolutely drowning on something. I loved figuring it out on my own. It was almost like people were like, let me tell you, no. I don't want to know. Let me figure it out on my own. For a couple of reasons. I wanted to be able to take credit for not having somebody hold my hand through the process. But I also knew I would come up with something better. And that's what's missing a lot in today's education with kids is it's easy to teach by rote. And what I mean by easy, it's like the professors and teachers don't have to work very hard. So path of least resistance. I'm sorry, I'm not saying anything bad about both. Both my parents at one time were teachers. I've taught. I'm not bagging on teachers. My wife currently teaches. But what I don't like is when teachers take the easy way out. And the thing is, it's like, honestly, when everyone's doing this, it's really tempting. And so it's something that's not really taught because you can't have a standard curriculum for teaching process. You can't just throw it out there and have the kids absorb a certain amount and then go on to the next class. You're going to have to get to know the individual kid. You have to get to know the individual person. And that's what creativity speaking, I'm always fascinated with the questions no one asks because all the other questions have been asked. So when I see something, I always like being the one weirdo in the room that asks something no one else asks, not just to be weird. That's part of it's fun to be weird, but also it's always interesting. It's like, I've heard this, I don't need to hear the greatest hits. I'm not the guy screaming for Freebird at the Skinner concert. I want to hear something else. So.
No, I love it, man. I love it. And obviously, we're getting close to the end of our conversation and you really kind of know you've listened to almost every single episode. I don't know if you're caught up on this week or the last week or whatever, but
I still have to catch up. I'm up 2 episodes off, but besides that, I heard them all.
That which is insane, by the way. I don't know how
even the first one, your favorite one of all time.
I love it. So my question, as you know, is doing these podcasts and you being a podcast host now, you get to have interesting conversations with successful people. But the question is always, what is the definition of success? So my question for you is, what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Part of me has been waiting for this, but part of me was convinced you would not ask me the question because it's almost a setup. So it's like you double reversed me. It's like, so I wasn't really even planning on answering that question. I thought you were going to come up with something unique or weird, or go ask one of the early questions. I don't know.
One of the 5 rapid fire questions.
What's your favorite color?
What's your favorite smell?
Hey, remember when you hung out with Guy Fieri? Wasn't that cool? As far as success goes, I love that. I love this question when you ask the other people, because a lot of times they'll give like the same answer in different ways. With me, I don't view success is a Zen thing for me. And I don't mean that in a Buddha weird Zen kind of, more like Zen and art of motorcycle maintenance, tongue in cheek Zen. It's something that's unattainable. Success is not any one standard thing you can grapple. You can't just grab it and say, I have success. I am therefore successful. I will always be successful because I have gotten success in my hand. It's constantly changing. The rules constantly change. The direction constantly changes. The brass ring is constantly being moved around. So when you ask me what I view being successful is the constant, unrelenting pursuit of success. And that is not necessarily through the happy path of success, because success, in my opinion, is solely gained through failure. I've had people say, there's other ways. I go, no. There are, but they're fake successes. If you succeed at something the first time you never done it before, luck of the draw, luck of the roll, whatever, luck of the cards, do it again. When someone does something, it's like a slop shot. We don't count slop shots in pool. Why? Because there's no skill in that. It was a screw up. Right. You did not mean to bank the ball off of your friend. So, so you don't count it. So I don't count that. And then if you did it and you've never had to fail, you probably copied someone else. You're riding on someone else's shoulders. So I believe the true best version of success is through failure, and not just normal failure, abject, horrific, soul-shattering surprise failure, where the thing from left field is not a baseball, it's a freaking steamroller. Coming out of that, I'm much more fascinated with the horrific failures that or right before successes. So there you go. Like everything, my long answer to what I view success is. Now, as far as what 3 things, I would love to say I meditate. I would love to be able to do that, but I'm like you, Justin. I fall asleep when when I meditate, and I know you figured out ways around that. I could actually say the fact that every night I do one of my drawings. I'm up to 1,393 that I started doing my nightly sketches, and they have nothing to do with business. Or I have monetized them. Some of those sketches became Disney paintings. Some of them became designs for rock album I recently did. But
That's cool.
I did the cover art for it. But most of these things that I do, they're I just lost track of them. Jeez. The problem is when I'm tired, I'm thinking about a million things. I just forgot my train of thought on that one.
So your daily sketches is one of them.
My daily sketches is the form of meditation. Yeah, I was actually thinking, well, as I get on that, the Asperger takes over. It's like all of a sudden part of my brain's like, oh, what are you going to sketch tonight, Craig? I'm like, bunnies. I don't know what I was going to sketch tonight. Now I'm still off track. But the thing is that that's my meditation, because I don't do it just for the sake of doing it. I do it, but I'm not doing it on the table alone with my headphones. The TV's got to be on. Got to be a movie, something else. Hopefully nothing with subtitles, because I'll miss it all. But that's my form of meditation, I think, because I do it every day. You're talking about something I do every freaking day. Every day, I also make sure I accomplish at least one thing. And it can be stupid. And trust me, I own stupid. It's how I roll. I mean, it could be me fixing a sprinkler outside. It could be me just going through and throwing out a whole lot of paints that I meant to throw out 2 months ago, going through my shop, cleaning it. It could be me finishing a major project. It can be me actually wrapping up a couple of deadlines, or me figuring out a way to extend a few. It's got to be something that is accomplished. It's very easy to go down the path of being an anal retentive chef, where you just get so caught up in the process, you never get anything done. And there's an interesting thing: people that get stuck and they get memory block, or they get artistic block, writer's block. The problem is that you just need to do one thing. When you can't think of what to paint, then go do something else, but do it. Don't sit around feeling sorry for yourself. Don't keep trying that one test on SAT you haven't figured out. Go and do something else. Accomplish something that can be put in the black ink section of your world book on what you've done. Get it done, no matter how dumb and menial. Getting one thing done.
I love
so my drawing meditation, getting one thing done. And the third thing I would have to say is, it's in the category of getting something done, but in the opposite category, fail. Make sure you mightily, horrifically, tragically, Shakespearean tragically fail at least one thing every single freaking day. Now, this sounds negative, but the reality is you can only enjoy successes by how bad the failure was. In fact, if you got a really, really bad failure, anything that happens good in the day is bonus. There might be something that's like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. I don't really care. When things go horribly wrong, little things matter. So all of a sudden, you have a much better perspective. I've had people that have accused me of being negative. And I was like, I'm not negative. I'm a cynical optimist. If things go right, I'm happy. Christmas came early. If things go wrong, I don't have plan B. I've got plan freaking Z. So if things go wrong, I've already thought of it. I've already dwelled on it. I've already mulled it over. Prepared. And I got an answer. So everything goes wrong. It's like, oh, I got an answer for that. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. At least I can do an audible if my plans don't work. I still feel, hey, at least I had a good break. You're never going to see me frozen in the moment. And that's just because I plan on there being bad moments. Freezing is not an instinctual reaction. Freezing is a reaction when you haven't thought of something. But it doesn't mean you have to think of the answer. It means you can think of 5 answers that have nothing to do with what needs to be taken care of at that time. But the fact that you did that meant that it's kind of like knowing you're going to get punched. If someone says, I'm going to punch you in the stomach, 5, 4, 3, 2, you can steel yourself with a punch. Do you want to be punched? No. But if you know it's coming, it's always better than not knowing.
Yeah.
And so I guess you could say kind of part of me, and some people say, that's a lot of work. I'm like, well, what's a lot of work? Constantly steeling yourself and being ready and preparing, or having a glass chin, literally or figuratively in life. So I don't know. It's just everyone has that answer. Have to figure out their own answer. So
no, I love it, and it's true, man. And I think I'm that way in a sense, like knowing that things go wrong, and being prepared for that. And what does that look like? Like if this doesn't go the way we had planned, what's next? What's the second option? What else could we do? And you prepare yourself, and you play you walk yourself through those things. Like if I look at my live event, I had a list of speakers, but I went, well, if one of them says no, who's next? And I'd prepare myself for that just in case they said no. And I was fortunate only one ended up saying no. And I ended up replacing her with somebody even better. But, it's one of those things where when you're able to expect something to come your way, right? Like you're able to then maneuver out of the way. Like if you think about like boxing, you're about to get punched, so you better slip, right? You better move out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's really life, dude. But I love that. And now obviously, that I wrap up every single interview with one question. But before we get there, how do people get a hold of you? Where do they find your podcast? What's all the good stuff?
The good stuff is you can find me on mostly just about any social media platform. I'm on, except for Twitter. I don't do Twitter, or Tumblr, or TikTok, or I guess I'm not on every platform. You can find me on.
You would kill it on TikTok, by the way.
I would. I don't know. I'm just no, not going to do that. China already has all my information. I think probably the best one is the Craig Fraser Studios on Instagram, and also Craig Fraser Studios Facebook. That's where you'll also find the podcast. You can also go to YouTube and subscribe to the This May End Badly podcast, and that's up for subscription. But the live podcast is always Tuesday, 5:00 Pacific Standard Time. On the live link is on the Craig Fraser Studios Facebook page. You can also follow me on my personal Instagram and Facebook pages, which is just Craig Fraser or Air Syndicate. You can also at Fawn Fraser is my personal Instagram page, which is almost full. That's why people normally just hang out at Craig Fraser Studios. And then that's about it. You can also find videos I've done on the Craytex Tech Forum or CraytexColors.com, which is a company I do a lot of consulting work for. It's a paint company I work with. And that's about it. I can't think of anything else. Hectic Films, if you go and subscribe to any of the Hectic Films podcasts, I'm associated with them a lot because Ricky's my producer, and the This May End Badly podcast goes through Hectic Films. So, and then of course you can always just my phone number's out there. You can find it. I'm not going to give it right now. I'm going to make you work for it. You have to it'll take you 5 seconds to Google it. So that way, I make sure that no robots call me on a regular basis. But I'm out there, easy to get a hold of. Once you get my number, you can't get a hold of me. There's a reason, and you might want to really think about it. So.
What did you do? What did you do?
What did you do to Craig? Yeah,
that's
exactly.
right. I love it, man. And guys, make sure you do check out his podcast. I was a guest. He's got incredible guests on there, and I can't even imagine how it's going to grow and continue to be amazing. And at some point, you got to get Guy on there and tell some stories. But I already know that whole backstory.
I'll even say it right now. If I get Guy on there before I get Guy on Terry Weaver's, Terry's gonna be really mad at me, and I don't know if I can handle Terry's wrath. So.
Terry being mad is not the greatest thing in the world. That is for sure. But,
no, because it makes you feel bad. Other times, just people are mad at me, and I'm kind of like, "Oh man, that's cute. You're mad." With Terry, I actually stay up at night. Oh, I made Terry feel bad. That's like you're just a bad person if you're mean to Terry.
I love it, man. So obviously, as you know, I wrap up every single interview with this one question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, this question is: in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Biggest moment of growth. And what's funny is throughout me listening to your podcasts, I've had different ones. And I'd have to say the biggest moment of growth probably was I was in a pretty bad car accident. And it was 6 months after I got married. And we didn't know if I was going to get all the use of my right hand back. And we didn't even know if I was going to be mentally all there afterwards. Which there's the argument, you can still argue that. And every now and then, it doesn't work anymore. I used to be able to say, "Oh, I forgot to take out the trash, honey. Sorry, car accident." But I'd say it was the biggest a number of changes, because at that point I'd always been kind of a, not to, excuse my French, but don't give a fuck. But I'm sorry, it's the best way to put that phrase, mentality. But and even Terry says you just don't care. I'm like, it's not that I don't care. It's that I'm not worried of the consequence of certain things. So I'm not like overly paranoid about the consequence. So after that accident, it wasn't like all of a sudden I became a daredevil or anything. I just started realizing, well, what the hell? I always had that mentality, just kind of supercharged it a little bit. And then when I, because I have no sensation in this right hand. very, very little. It's weird little ghost sensations, but I wasn't sure if I could airbrush with this hand. And I was able to develop and go beyond that. And, but, all these different, you hear about people that get in these horrible accidents, whatever. Mine was not nearly as bad as it could have been, but it kind of woke me up to, the fact that, you can sit around and feel sorry for yourself, or you could turn around and say, well, this wasn't handed to me, therefore it was never intended to be mine. Or you can just be the kind of person that's like, it's a lot easier to say forgiveness than to ask permission. And that's what it pretty much came to for me. I had people that say, how can you, how do you do that? I'm like, just do it. I mean, they're not going to kill you. Trust me. Yeah. It's not it's not a suspenseful movie where any action will have an immediate horrible reaction. It's just life. And most people are scared to death of things they have nothing to be scared of. They're scared of change, and it's going to happen whether they're scared of it or not. At least you could ride it, like a wave.
Yeah.
You can drown or you can surf it. It's your choice.
It's your choice. I love it. Craig, this conversation has been absolutely incredible, man. I'm glad that we met however many years ago that was. I'm glad to call you a friend. And I'm sure you're going to be back on the show in the future, dude. This was phenomenal. Thank you. I
would love to. And definitely looking forward to hearing more of your shows out there. And maybe I can get Guy Fieri on yours. You got more numbers. I guess it's more impressive for me to, plus it makes me look magnanimous. Oh, no, please do my friend Justin's show.
So. I love it, man. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.